Guys, we have a problem. I scoured the internet for concrete textures, large scale concrete textures, not the like close-up concrete that you get, you know, on every texture site. I'm looking for large like dams or large drainage ditches, you know, that kind of stuff. So what we're gonna do in this video is head to 3 different locations and capture a bunch of different large-scale concrete textures. I'm gonna show you guys all the different things you need to watch out for if you wanna do this yourself. We're gonna stitch them together on site using Wacom's new mobile workstation, and then we're gonna head back to the house and process everything in Photoshop. And I just dropped my concrete material pack. It comes with 10 huge to massive scale seamless concrete materials, all PBR, all handmade, ready to make your 3D scenes look super awesome. 50% off for this week only. Link in the description. So we're right under the middle of this giant beam right here. I'm choosing this one because there's not any bunch of sticks or leaves on this one. It's just pure concrete. I'm gonna throw this tripod down right in the middle of this thing and take a series of images across the whole top of this. We can't capture all this in one image. I'm gonna have to capture this in a bunch of individual images that'll be later stitched together in Photoshop. So I'm just trying to make sure that like I got like 40 to 70% overlap within that range. Another thing I'm doing is using the 2-second timer so that my micro movements in my hands don't add any motion blur. All right, so we just shot the whole underside of this bridge. I'm gonna bust out the Wacom mobile studio. Then we'll hit our next 2 locations knowing that we're all set. Wacom's mobile studio is my go-to for any on-site work like this. It's basically a laptop and a tablet in one. It's great. It's got a Quadro P1000 GPU and a bunch of shortcut buttons to make things super easy. And its 4K resolution makes for these high-res screen caps. So I'll go to File, Automate, Photo Merge, and we'll select the JPEGs we just shot and hope for the best. Sweet, yeah, this looks good. I think everything is stitched pretty nicely, everything's working, and we'll clean things up later. On to the next spot. Look at this wall though. Look how special this wall is. It's got like the pock marks, it's got a bunch of cracks in it, it's got a bunch of swipes and scrapes, and it's got spray paint on it, but then it's covered up by the city and then re-spray painted. We got grunge marks, leakage, everything you could ask for built into this wall, and we're gonna shoot shot by shot by shot down the length of this thing. Make it as long as you want. So we're gonna go off the tripod on this one. Again, make sure your guys' settings are all manualed out. You want manual white balance, you want manual shutter speed, you want manual ISO. Don't change your focal length, keep it the same throughout. So I'm just counting my steps. I take 5 steps, and that's the 40 to 70% overlap between each shot. I'm making sure to not get too close to the wall and not to get too far away. I'm keeping it consistent. So basically between these 2 lines, I'm just keeping that steady rate the whole time. You want to avoid this kind of stuff, these shadows. Any texture you're going to shoot, you want to make sure it's like unlit. There are no shadows that are determining its lighting condition. This is flat enough that we can change it to however you want. You know, we can make it overcast. When you bring it into your 3D program, you can add a sunlight, you'll get some cool shadows and stuff. So this is perfect. What happened to your shoe? God, I got a flat. What are you gonna do about that? It doesn't keep going. All right. So we have officially shot out all of our concrete images. We're gonna go back to the place, stitch them together in Photoshop, and then we're going to process them all and turn them into usable textures for your 3D programs. I'm gonna show you guys how to make normal maps, roughness, and specular maps in Photoshop and clean it up, make it look nice. Let's do it. Now we shot 2 different types of panorama styles today. Traditional panoramas and linear panoramas. For a traditional pano, the series of images are taken from one fixed point, like the Underbridge series we did, or the Dam Wall series. For a linear pano, the images are taken as you move from one spot to the next, like in the case of our super long concrete wall or concrete ceilings. A traditional pano is stitched pretty simply, but a linear pano is much more involved, and we'll go over both in this video, starting with the full process on a traditional panorama stitch. Let's drag our 16-bit raw dam images into Photoshop. Now since we shot raw, it's going to open up Adobe Camera Raw, and that's exactly what we want because we want to remove any sort of lens distortion caused by our 24mm lens on all of these images before we stitch them together. It's going to give you the best results. So we have all of our images down below. I'm gonna hold Shift, select them all, and under the Optics tab, I'm gonna check the Use Profile Corrections box. And you can see, when I turn this on and off, it's just applying a very small correction to compensate for lens distortion. And we can select our camera and the lens we used very specifically from a massive list here to get the right distortion correction. The last thing we'll do is make a batch exposure adjustment. So I'm just gonna hover over the histogram right in the middle and drag this up so that that mountain in this data is right in the center of the histogram. And that'll give us a really nice exposure to work with. So let's go ahead and open these up. To stitch these images together, let's go to File, Automate, Photo Merge, and we'll add open files. Yep, this is fine. These are all the files that we need. And usually auto stitch with vignette removal checked is the way to go. So let's just hit OK. And that's a pretty flawless stitch. Just to give you an example, this is with geometric distortion checked, and this is with it unchecked. So sometimes it can screw up your stitch, but sometimes it works out. So you just need to experiment with it. Now this looks like a pretty solid stitch right here. So the next thing we'll want to do is align this image so all of our horizontal lines are truly horizontal and all the vertical lines are truly vertical without any sort of bending or stretching effects. So I'll select all these images, hit Ctrl J to make a copy, Ctrl E to merge them into one image, and I'll just select the rest of these, hit Ctrl G to group them, just in case we screw this up. I'm gonna hop back into Adobe Camera Raw, Ctrl Shift A with that image selected. And there's a really cool effect under the Geometry tab. So I'll open that up, and on the far right, you'll see this little hashtag looking sign. And that's going to allow us to draw some reference lines that Photoshop can use to straighten out this image. We can figure that, this line here along this edge is straight, and probably this one here up the wall right about there. So that's going to straighten things out left and right, but we need to do top and bottom as well. So probably this line looks pretty straight to me. And to be honest, I don't know if this bridge is curved or not, but I'm just gonna go for it and say that's a straight line. And that looks pretty square to me. We're not gonna use this whole image. We're just gonna use about the center 60% of this thing. So let's hit OK and take a look at the difference. You see that? Things are a little bit more straight now. So like I mentioned, we don't want to use this entire image, so we're going to have to crop it. But I would urge you to be very conservative with the crop here, because we can content aware fill things out very easily, like this grass patch or these bars and stuff. So I'm just going to bring the top of this crop down to the first usable bits of concrete here. This looks pretty good to me. All right, almost there. Let's just take care of all this stuff that we don't need for our texture, like this grass and these bars and whatnot. So I'll use a few tools to get rid of the grass, the pipes, and this concrete cylinder. It's going to be the patch tool, content aware fill, the healing brush, and the clone stamp tool. So let's start with the patch tool. Set to source, and let's just drag this to another spot that looks about right. I'm just lining up with these lines here, and it looks pretty natural to me. That feels good. Now to fill this gap, we can select this transparent space, hit Shift Backspace, make sure Contents is set to Content Aware, and hit OK. And Photoshop is going to reference the entire image to fill in these transparent areas pretty well. Next, let's try and get rid of this cylinder. I'm just going to do a selection around this, keeping it pretty tight, and let's grab this bush too, and we'll do the same thing to get rid of that piece. That looks pretty good. Let's grab the polygon lasso tool and make a pretty tight selection around this water pipe here. Again, Shift Backspace to content aware fill this water pipe out of existence. And finally, for this pipe here, it's actually giving me trouble with the content aware fill tool, so I'm going to try the spot healing brush on this one. I'll click once at the bottom, hold Shift, and click once at the top, and that'll draw a straight line from point A to point B and completely get rid of that thing. Now you can get rid of this paint patch as well if you want. This feels really good to me. This is a really nice diffuse texture. I'm digging this a lot. Now, before we make this texture seamless, I want to do a couple color correction edits on this thing. Let's make a levels adjustment. I'll drag the gamma up just a bit. And if you select the white box here next to the levels adjustment and hit Control-I for invert, it's gonna turn off the effect. But if we grab a large soft brush at a low opacity and we set it to white, we can actually paint on in this little box. It's tiny, but I'm sure you guys can see it. And I just want to paint in a little bit of the areas that are feeling a little dark. And on top of that, I feel like there's a little bit of color balance issues between the concrete here. So I'm going to make a photo filter effect, crank it up just a little bit to warm things up. We're going to do the same thing, Control-I to invert that adjustment. And with that soft, large white brush, I'm just gonna paint in the areas that I'm feeling like are a little cool that need to be warmed up just a bit. And just like that, this is feeling a little bit better to me. So let's take all three of these layers, hit Control-J to duplicate, Control-E to merge. Let's group these again just in case we screw this up. So now it's time to make things seamless. So when you tile this material in your 3D program, you don't see the seams and this concrete wall will appear endless. And the way to do that is essentially to go to Filter, Other, Offset, and type in half the value of your resolution. In our case, it's 6059 by 6059, roughly 3030 by 3030. And this will give you a tiled view of your image. If we can make this image look like it's one image versus 4 quadrants, then our texture will truly be seamless. So I'm going to utilize the clone stamp tool to make this seamless. You can have a large soft brush with a low opacity to build up your texture over time. I found this is the best way to go when trying to maintain as much detail as possible. Content aware fill just kind of makes things look a little bit muddy. And you can see that the sides are made seamless pretty easily, but the top and bottom it's a bit more difficult because there's this real nice layer of leaky grunge up at the top that you just don't have at the bottom. So what I'm doing is copying a few of these cracks, making them pretty dark and putting them right in the midline. So it makes for a bit more of a natural loop than just leaving it as it is. Because mainly this texture will be used to tile left to right as opposed to up and down. So this is looking like a really nice diffuse texture that tiles pretty well. I'm just holding Alt to test things out to see how it works. Generally, this looks pretty nice. So we have our first complete texture. You can add some contrast with some levels here, maybe take down the saturation just a bit, but this is a 6000 by 6000 image with plenty of resolution to get into and zoom up in for 3D. I can't wait to use these on some large renders. I'm very excited. But before we get into creating normal maps, specular maps, roughness maps, and all that good stuff, I want to talk to you guys about stitching a linear panorama. So I'm in Adobe Lightroom. I've imported my raw images and there's 3 things that we need to do to ensure that this can be stitched together properly. So here's what I'm doing for every single image. First, I'm going to apply the lens corrections. I'm going to account for lens distortion. So I'll check this on and off. You can see it's taking care of vignetting and it's taking care of our lens distortion. What you can do is go to develop settings. We'll copy it and just make sure lens correction is checked, uncheck everything else, we'll copy, and we could apply this to everything else in one swoop by shift clicking everything, right clicking, and pasting those settings. That way we don't have to do it one by one, but for the rest of these adjustments, we need to do it one by one. So I'll just show you on one image and then we'll hop over into Photoshop and stitch it together. So under the Develop tab, you can scroll down and find the Transform option. Here's that same little hashtag we used earlier. Let's click that and we're going to manually align each one of these images. So one for the top, one for the bottom, and I want to find some vertical points here that we can use. So let's grab this. That's great. And this one here. That's perfect. And we just make sure that this is as clean as possible. I'm going to make an exposure adjustment. So if we hover over the histogram, right in the middle, you can see exposure is written on the bottom left. I'm just going to click and drag and get that mountain right in the middle. And finally, I'm going to crop this down. So we'll click the crop overlay here. We'll make sure the lock is unlocked so we can change the aspect ratio and get right up to the ground there, right up to the top of this thing. And that is exactly what we need to do for every single one of these images so that we can stitch it together in Photoshop. Once again, let's go to File, Automate, Photo Merge. And let's browse for our images this time. Grab all of these, hit OK. We're going to check vignette removal as well as geometric distortion correction on this one. Auto is fine, and let's hit OK. And would you look at that? It's perfect, minus this little piece on the end, but we can just manually stitch that on. It is very, very close, and I'm going to show you guys how we can warp this image to truly straighten it out. And look how big this image is, 0.85%. We go up to 100%, and we have resolution for days. This size of this thing is 181,000 pixels by almost 9,000 pixels. So this is what we're gonna make our master texture from. So let me show you how to account for this slight warping on just a chunk of this image. With everything selected, it's just one layer baked down with Control E. I'm gonna hit Control T for transform, and if we right click, we can select warp. And we can essentially move these Bezier points around until everything feels just about right. Now, if for whatever reason you need to chop this up into a bit more detail for the warp tool, you can come up to the top and you'll have some of these warp options. So you can add different little slices here. So if you want to just work on the left side of this, you can add a slice there and just work on the left side, have it not affect the rest of the image, you know what I mean? And the same goes for horizontal slices. You can make a horizontal slice and just work on the top chunks. Generally, you want to work as non-intrusively as possible, so the fewer adjustments you can make on this thing overall, the better. And now it's time to make the rest of our texture maps that will go along with these textures to really make them shine and be completely usable in 3D. Alright, so let's make the rest of these texture maps here. The difference between just this and the combination of the other ones that we're going to create right now is huge. So your diffuse texture or your color texture, it needs a specular or reflection texture to tell your 3D program which parts of the image are reflective, which aren't, and everywhere in between. The roughness texture determines how spread out your reflections are over specific areas of your image, and the normal map tells which parts of your texture are raised or recessed, creating the illusion of depth. So let's start with creating a normal map here. And I had no idea you can create one in Photoshop, but shout outs to Winbush for filling us all in. You gotta go check out his channel. So the first thing I'll do is just duplicate my diffuse texture. I'm gonna right click it and convert it to a smart object. That way, if we make any mistakes or we wanna change our normal map, we can. And we simply just need to go to Filter, 3D, and right here you have Generate Normal Map. You can do a bump or height map as well, but I find that normal map is probably the best in this situation. Awesome, so we have this dialog box that pops up, and we have a couple settings that we can tweak to, change the results. So from the top, we have invert height. If we want to check that, we can see what it does. Basically, what Photoshop is doing is anything that's black is being pushed up, anything that's white is being pushed down, or reverse if you invert your normals. And I think for this image, this orientation works best for us. Now you have your detail scale slider. We can crank that up if you really want to go hot and heavy on it, but I like right in the middle. And these sliders here, low, medium, and high, basically the low slider, if I crank this up to 50, you can see that it's going to take like a large area of the image and give it more peaks and valleys over a larger distance. But I like that personally down to 5%. The medium detail is basically any medium scale detail, and the high detail are your small finite details, and that's where we're getting the most out of this thing. So you can see if I take this to 5, it's really going to cut down and kind of make it look a little blurry, but I like this up at around 80 to get that real nice crispy detail out of this entire image. And that's our normal map. So you'll notice that specifically like this area here, this white chalk, all these little, I don't know if that's bird poop or what, but basically the normal map is saying, oh, those are recessed pretty heavily into the image. What you can do is actually take your diffuse material and tweak it so that those white streaks go away. You can also take down these black streaks too and say, maybe they're not pushed up as much, or maybe it's just, scaling down the intensity of your normal map. But just know that you can tweak your diffuse texture to set it up for that normal map
so that it is as accurate as possible. Next up, we have our specular and roughness materials. So both of these are similar in the sense that they are black and white texture maps. So the first thing I'll do is make a little adjustment here. Let's do black and white, and we can check this little box right down here. This is going to only affect the image below it. So it's just going to affect this specular. Bam, I'll hit that. And generally with specular and roughness maps, black is off and white is on. So for specular, black means it's not shiny at all. White means it's super shiny. And this is just going to determine how shiny different parts of this image are. So with that, I'm going to create a curves adjustment and even things out just a little bit. I'm gonna drop the contrast, and I'll probably lower this just a bit. And it's gonna be about as simple as that. So we're saying that this image here is reflective, but it's not super reflective because it is concrete. And these black areas here are less reflective. Now, technically, since these are like watery streaks, we probably want to invert this. These bits are probably gonna be a bit more reflective than just the dry old concrete. So we can take our specular image, hit Control-I, and it'll invert that entire selection. And finally, we have the roughness channel. So the roughness map, once again, it's a black and white one. So let's add that black and white adjustment. And let's also check this box so it only affects the image below it, doesn't affect all the other stuff. Let's create a curves adjustment. And again, if we know that white is completely rough, meaning this is going to be more of like a matte look. Like if you see the matte wraps on certain cars, that's what this is doing. It's spreading out the reflection. But if everything is black, that means it's going to be, your reflection is going to be super mirror-like your iPhone screen. You're going to see those crisp reflections in the black screen, essentially, right? So knowing that, we probably want a little bit of roughness on our concrete. We want to spread out that reflection just a bit. Somewhere around here, I think, is probably good. So with that, we have a roughness texture, a specular texture. They look very, very similar. A normal texture and a diffuse texture. And combining all four of these together will get you a really nice look in any 3D program that you want. Okay, so one last bonus tip, and this one is huge. It allows you to organize your custom materials inside of Quizel Bridge. Quizel Bridge is free, and they offer a bunch of textures, materials, and all that good stuff. I found out about this from Winbush. Once again, he's letting us know, and he does a full-on detailed version of what I'm about to show you on his channel, so definitely go check that out. The dude's awesome. So we'll just go to File, Import Assets, and I'll navigate to the folder that has the assets needed, and automatically it pulled it up. You can name it, you can select surface. Yep, it's a surface, and it knows it's an 8K resolution file, so we can choose all the different image textures here. So diffuse, all right, we can choose our 8K, and normal, specular, roughness, right? It has all the stuff, and it gives us this preview file here, so we can import this and export out the 8K, 4K, or 2K resolution versions of our material. It's amazing. So I'm gonna definitely be plugging all the rest of my custom textures and surface imperfections into Quizel Bridge. And that just about wraps it up. If you want to get your hands on this endless concrete material pack, then this week is the week to do it. I'm running a 50% off deal for the next 7 days only. It comes with 10 unique, large to massive scale, seamless concrete materials, all ready to go and use in any 3D program you want and amp up your 3D experience. The link is in the description. Check it out. But my goodness, what a tutorial. We talked about the best practices for shooting textures outside and the difference between a traditional panorama and a linear panorama. We brought those images into Photoshop, we corrected the lens distortion, we aligned them, we stitched them together, and we made them seamless. Then we created normal maps, specular maps, and roughness maps. And then finally, we learned how to package it all together in Quizel Bridge to get them out into your 3D programs as fast as possible. So get out there and start making your own textures. I promise 3D is a lot more fun when you start doing so.
Leave your tips and findings in the comments below. And if you hadn't already, join my Discord server. It's full of a bunch of like-minded artists just like yourself looking to learn and grow together and amp up their game in 3D. And tomorrow is the last day to get your submission in for the Dynamic Machines Community Render Challenge. August 1st, 11:59 p.m. PST is the deadline, so get your submission in. The link to submit is in the description as well, so don't miss out. The incredible community montage is coming a little later in August, so be sure to subscribe to see that, and for a very big announcement next weekend. So I'll see you guys then. Peace.